Thank you all for having me here. I have a presentation that's up on these two screens that I'm going to be referring to. Can I have the first slide, please? Pardon?
There is one slide.
Oh, there's one here too. So here we have, this is the history of world asbestos use. And it starts 100 years ago. The recent years, you see, the consumption of asbestos in the world has not continued to decline. It declined a great deal in the 1990s. But after that, it leveled off. And the reason for that is because China and India are using a lot of asbestos. And this is offsetting the reductions in other countries. There are over 50 countries which have banned asbestos in the world. And this is the problem. Next picture, please. This is a picture of a man who is, this is a picture of the problem. The man is cutting a sheet of asbestos cement roofing, and you can see the dust in his hair. His hair is white from the dust from cutting the roofing. And children are playing around. It's in the middle of a community. There's a lot of opportunity for public exposure to the deadly dust this man is creating when he cuts these sheets of asbestos cement. Next slide, please. This is just some more pictures of the familiar roofing that we're talking about, the asbestos-containing product, which should not be used anymore in Bihar or any place else in India. You see that the product gets used even after its breakage for things like fencing, as shown here. Next. Outside of the asbestos factories, there are very often disposal of broken sheets of asbestos cement. And these pictures were taken in Indonesia 2 years ago. So here we have people scavenging, collecting the broken pieces of the asbestos for reuse. And so the problem never goes away. You see that buildings, people try to put up with the fragments of the waste asbestos. All the asbestos cement factories that operate create a lot of waste. And so if you have an asbestos cement plant that's allowed to be built in the state of Bihar, you're going to be dealing with the waste all around the plant, just like these people were in Indonesia, the contamination and the cancer hazard that arises from these wastes being dumped around the environment. Now in Canada, there was a lot of concern about the export of asbestos to India, and so the Canadian Broadcasting Company sent some people out. Next slide, please. And they showed that there was no protection for the workers in India who were handling the Canadian asbestos. This worker is wearing a piece of cloth to protect himself from the dust. The microscopic asbestos fibers that cause the lung damage are way too small for this cloth to do any good in protecting the worker. You need a very properly designed and fitted and maintained respirator for a worker to wear if he's going to be protected at all from the microscopic dust of asbestos that causes all the disease. And so these were more pictures that the Canadian Broadcasting Company put on television in Canada to show the truth about the way Canadian asbestos was being used in India 3 years ago. And the Canadians are no longer mining asbestos. They are no longer exporting asbestos to the developing world as of September, well, as of last year, the last mine closed, and they will not be reopened. Again, the picture of the problem, the wastes all around, children being exposed. This is a typical situation you have from the use of asbestos cement building materials in your country. Substitute materials should be used. So there are two types of substitutes. There are substitutes where you replace the asbestos fibers with other types of fibers in making the fiber cement. And there's a company called Everest here in India, in Coimbatore. They have a plant. They are starting to manufacture fiber cement using plastic fibers, polymer, polypropylene fibers. And this is a process that has been used and developed in Brazil for 10 years. And so this is, if you're going to be making fiber cement products in India, you should be using non-asbestos fiber cement products. And the alternatives also include, next slide, totally different materials. I'll talk a little more about the Parry tiles in a moment. These can be made with local materials like cement, sand, and gravel, and local labor, and much more appropriate and comparable in cost to the asbestos products. There are also clay and the various types of metal and plastic roofing materials which can be used instead of asbestos cement. So you can either replace the asbestos in fiber cement, or you can just use a wholly different building material. Next, please. These are the microconcrete roofs, the Parry tiles I was mentioning before. And as I say, these can be made with cement and sand and gravel, and made with local labor, local materials. And this is in Thailand. This was tsunami relief reconstruction, the roof on these buildings. And this is the kind of thing that the government of India or the government of Bihar could encourage, could tell people this is what we would like people to be using instead of asbestos in schools, in public buildings, and private buildings. This kind of material has been used in countries all over the world. Next, please. Next slide. And this is a health clinic in a remote area in Thailand with one of these roofs made with these Parry tiles. So this is the kind of technology that would be quite suitable in Bihar and Orissa and other states where there are alternatives that can be made more available, alternatives to asbestos. And you won't have to worry for the rest of the life of the building every time someone has to do repairs or renovations or demolition, that the dust is going to be created and create a cancer hazard for the workers and for the people who live in the buildings. Use safer materials, the way to go. Next slide, please. These are men that are making these Parry tiles. You can make these with molds that don't even require electricity. You can use hand-powered presses and molds to make these tiles out of basic types of materials. So this is, these men are doing that. Next. These are just some examples of alternatives to asbestos. This is something that's being sold in Laos. Next. And with asbestos cement pipes, which have, I think, been widely used in water and wastewater systems in India, again, alternatives are available. Basically, we're talking about plastic pipes and metal pipes that can be used instead. And for wastewater and sewer lines, things like clay pipes can be used. So there are plenty of alternatives to asbestos cement. Next. Vehicle brakes have been replaced in all new cars, but in the replacement brakes for old cars, asbestos is still used in India, and this is something that should be stopped. China, which is the major user of asbestos, actually imposed a ban on asbestos in vehicle brakes in 2003. So this is, by way of comparison, shows that it can be done and has been done in other countries. Next, please. Water storage tanks have also been made with asbestos cement. There are plenty of alternatives, fiberglass and plastic made. Next, please. And so the World Bank has said that you shouldn't use asbestos in any new World Bank construction projects. And if you already have asbestos in buildings that need to be repaired and are being repaired under a World Bank project, that they should be repaired under careful conditions with protection of the workers and bagging of the wastes and burying of the wastes so that there isn't any needless public or worker exposure to the dust from the asbestos in the buildings. And next, please. Then there are lots of different safeguards that are detailed in the World Bank report. I won't go into these, but there are lots of problems. If you have a building with asbestos cement in it, it needs to be managed in a way to limit people's exposure to the dust. And that's a continual problem every time there's damage and repairs and renovations made in the building. And this is what you want to avoid by using non-asbestos materials in the first place. Next, please. Next. Next. And the World Health Organization has also said all countries should ban asbestos, should not use asbestos products. The World Health Organization has been saying this since 2006. The World Health Organization estimates that 107,000 people die from asbestos-related disease every year in the world. And these are all preventable deaths. Next. The ILO, the International Labor Organization, has also said that all countries should ban asbestos. China may be moving toward doing that, and if that happens, that would leave India kind of standing as the world's leading asbestos-using country when all the other countries have turned away from it. And so you need to be thinking about starting to turn this around. You have a public health disaster in the making here. Here the people in Muzaffarpur and in Vaishali have been confronting the asbestos industry and have been opposing the construction of new asbestos factories in their towns. And I think that in just about every country, if people knew about the dangers of asbestos and the asbestos industry wanted to build a factory in their town, they would face these kinds of demonstrations anywhere in the world, anywhere at least where people are allowed to get out and protest about things like this public health tragedy. So I'm going to conclude here because you're probably having enough difficulty understanding me. I hope that the photos have been of some help.